They're the punchlines and jokes on late-night talk shows, subject of memes and general scorn, along with flat earthers. People who don't vaccinate their children, dubbed anti-vaxxers, are increasing in numbers and visibility. But I have some questions. I mean, how did this movement even start? Why did it begin in the US? And why does it seem that so many outspoken anti-vaxxers are women? Where are the anti-vax dads? Instead of complaining about women making bad choices, I'm going to look at how Oprah, Facebook, and Big Pharma screwed up. Bonus, deconstructing Karen memes. Or if you're after the science of vaccines, please check out the video description. I've linked to a few TED Talks talking about this topic. A crucial key to understanding anti-vaxxers is to realize it's not that they don't understand the science, but that they fundamentally do not trust it. Which begs the question, why would a group of people stop believing in scientific research? A great article in Medium by Wyatt Edward Gates explains why. My argument in summary. The core issue driving anti-vaccination attitudes is a lack of trust rather than a lack of knowledge. Since nearly all anti-vaxxers are women, it's likely this lack of trust is a direct result of well-documented mistreatment of women by the medical establishment as a result of endemic sexism. These breaches of trust may explain why a sane and rational mother would come to distrust medical science, which for me is a short leap of logic to distrust vaccinations. So I'm also going to look at this claim, are most anti-vaxxers women? However, to really begin, we're going to need some background and context. We need to look at the world's oldest profession, the natural result of when straight men and women are alone together. I'm talking, of course, about midwives. But one, women have historically been left out of science and medicine. I'm going to focus on Europe in the 1600s to the 1900s. Because it's been traditionally a job for women, I'm going to use midwives to look at how sexism has impacted women's health. Childbirth has been the leading cause of death of women for millennia, and continuing advances in medicine have been helping to alleviate this. Since the 17th century in Europe, there's been increased emphasis on the scientific method, which involves testing hypotheses and theories with careful observation. However, women were left out of this change in science, which is strange considering that women have been helping other women give birth for centuries, and midwifery has had its own system of teaching and apprenticeship. From the 1600s, many countries in Europe, such as England, France, Germany, Netherlands, and Italy, had various ways of licensing and training midwives. Further, a few midwives even wrote their own medical texts and offered instructional classes. They weren't all old women using old wives' tales and folk remedies. Midwifery was a necessary and trusted profession. But during this time period, nearly all universities in Europe would not admit women as students. Women in medicine had other restrictions placed on them too. For example, in the 1700s, male surgeons and doctors were allowed to use tools, such as forceps, while female midwives could not. It was believed that women didn't have the mental abilities to be scientists or doctors, a belief that has persisted well into the 1900s. Echoing the popular thinking of his time, English naturalist Charles Darwin had complex views on the differences in men and women, and while he thought that women could, in practice, achieve the same as men, he wrote that men has ultimately become superior to women. The average person's views on women were less nuanced. American doctor Hammond Clarke published a book in 1884 called Sex and Education, where he argues that women cannot attend university because they become sterile and develop mental problems due to the stress. Right. Even famous physicist Marie Sklodowska-Curie faced professional roadblocks. In 1911, the French Academy of Sciences rejected her application because she was a woman. Women cannot be part of the Institute of France, said one of the leading French physicists. Even for the most determined, there were institutionalized barriers preventing women from advancing in science and medicine. By the 20th century, male doctors rose in popularity as the popularity of midwives declined in Europe. This decline was particularly steep in the US, especially as birth moved out of the home and into the hospital. Over time, women began to prefer male doctors over female midwives. This, to me, is the beginning of the gap between women and modern medicine. While I focus on midwives here, there are other ways that women have been left out of medicine. For example, doctors ignoring women's complaints of pain or not taking them as seriously, and women not being included in clinical trials as often as men. I've linked to some research about these points in the description. So, this is our background. Women have historically been kept out of medicine, and women's health concerns have historically been overlooked. Enter spiritualism and alternative medicine. To understand the anti-vaccine movement, we need to look at other times that the US was fascinated by bad science mixed with faith. Enter spiritualism, a religious movement. Think seances, mediums, and being able to communicate with the dead. It first became popular in the 1840s, and a lot of the prominent spiritualists were women, such as the Fox sisters. In her book, Radical Spirits, Spiritualism and Women's Rights in the 19th Century, author Anne Braude argues that spiritualism and women's rights were linked, in part, because spiritualism was a way for women to defy the Victorian social conventions. Well, moving further in the 20th century, after the rise of 1960s counterculture, there's an increased interest in a loosely held group of beliefs called alternative medicine. This ranged from everything from traditional Chinese remedies like acupuncture to outright pseudoscience like homeopathy. In the 1970s, there was also an increase in home birth, fueled in part because of second-wave feminism. To me, this is where women's distrust of modern medicine and a misplaced trust of alternative medicine really began. Not that home birth is always better than giving birth in a hospital or vice versa, or that the increase in medical intervention in birth has always been good. However, making any medical decision based more on ideology than facts is a problem. Books like Witches, Midwives, and Nurses, published in 1973, helped cement this connection. Despite the fact that, for centuries, licensed midwives in Europe were affiliated with the church, and they were sometimes called on to testify and uphold church doctrine and morals, like testifying in cases of rape or to see if an infant had been stillborn in case of suspected infanticide. The authors do acknowledge this discrepancy in the new edition. We should clarify the role of the European medical profession relative to church and state. This is a dangerous combination. While medicine has failed women in a lot of significant ways, blindly putting trust in another system is not the answer. Further, equating all traditional forms of medicine as inherently feminist or woman-friendly is disingenuous. Just because something is outside mainstream medicine doesn't mean it's some kind of innate female wisdom. And I'm saying this as a herb-burning, candle-lighting person who meditates in front of her altar and puts her rocks out in the light of a full moon to be cleansed. Just as not all Christians take prayer over chemotherapy, not all New Agers take burning sage over the scientific method. Number 3, Oprah and New Age BS. Oprah introduced us to Dr. Oz, a guy with a title and lots of opinions about medicine and your health. As for his reliability, well, this late article by Kurt Anderson sums up. For a study in the British medical journal BMJ, a team of experienced evidence reviewers analyzed Dr. Oz's honor advice, 80 randomly chosen recommendations from 2013. The investigators found legitimate supporting evidence for fewer than half. The most famous physician in the United States, the man Oprah Winfrey branded as America's Doctor, is a dispenser of make-believe. So I had some fun looking at old clips of Dr. Oz's videos on YouTube. Sometimes it's pretty innocuous, like this quote about avoiding cigarettes and toxins. You know, toxins. That extremely scientific word with lots of medical research to back it up. And here's Dr. Oz talking about how green coffee beans can help you lose weight. And this has got to be true, right? I mean, the man has doctor in front of his name. This is an utter quackery designed to prey people's insecurities while making money. Worse, Oprah gave Jenny McCarthy, patron saint of the myth of autism and vaccines, a platform to spout her nonsense. In 2007, McCarthy was on Oprah's show talking about her son with autism, and they had the following exchange. First thing I did, Google. I put in autism and heard my research. Thank God for Google. I'm telling you. Thank God for Google. The University of Google is where I got my degree from. This show is still up on Oprah's website, without any acknowledgement of the junk science it contains. This is a screenshot I took of the website. Thanks someone for Google so I could find this. Granted, Oprah isn't the only celebrity hawking weird new agey stuff. Here's Jim Carrey with Jenny McCarthy at an anti-vaccine rally in 2008. Still, McCarthy has been by far the most outspoken and prominent celebrity spreading this nonsense, even writing an introduction to the book Callous Disregard, which is written by Andrew Wakefield, a discredited British doctor whose bad science and debunked research first suggested the now disproven link between vaccines and autism. In a bigger picture sense, however, I think it's important to remember that Oprah and McCarthy aren't outliers if we want this sort of anti-science thinking with a sprinkle of new aginess on top. For example, here's Gwyneth Paltrow's website Goop, with amazing stuff about cleansing your skin of toxins. And here's Paltrow getting sued for advising people to put rose quartz eggs in their vaginas for very sound scientific reasons. To be fair, this type of magical thinking isn't reserved just for the new age. Here's Christian evangelist Joel Osteen suggesting you can become rich just by visualizing money. I'm sorry, this sounds exactly like the Wicca books I used to read in high school. And despite everything I saw in the movie The Craft, I don't think you can make objects materialize just by thinking about them. So in this context, anti-vaxxers seem a bit more understandable. They're part of a larger landscape of people in the US who have been stuck in this very American idea that hard work is all you need and somehow our thoughts can shape reality. Kind of like this pull yourself up by the bootstraps myth, perpetuated by Horatio Alger. Also, this isn't the first time medicine and belief have been mixed up with deadly consequences. In 1875, Mary Baker Eddy wrote a book stating that disease can be cured through prayer alone. Christian Science, the religion started from her beliefs, still has members that refuse medical treatment for their children instead of letting their children die. Is it because Americans have historically distrusted authority figures? Or we've often brushed off academics and medicine as being stuck in ivory towers? Those are really good questions, but I don't have time to answer, at least not in this video. But there's a key to understanding anti-vaxxers. Their distrust in the medical establishment isn't entirely unfounded. On one hand, a healthy sense of skepticism can be about medical research, fueled by profit can be a good thing. Advertising prescription drugs on TV, for example, seems like a really blatant confusion of medicine and profit. As a personal example, I've struggled with depression for years, and a big part of the reason why I didn't try depression medication earlier was that I didn't trust my therapists and doctors to make unbiased, informed decisions about my health. I mean, were they recommending these things because they truly believed was the best course of treatment? Or had they just seen a lot of Prozac ads on TV? More recently, with the opioid epidemic in the US, pharmaceutical companies have been sued over pushing doctors to overprescribe opioid-based painkillers, downplaying how addictive and dangerous they are to doctors. And anyone who's ever had to shop for or buy health insurance in the US is also familiar with this. When your access to medicine and treatment is based on not whether you need it, but whether you can afford it, it can be hard to sometimes trust doctors and the science behind them. 4. People make money off of promoting bad science. Dear Gap, with a long history of women being left out of medicine and scientific research, the spread of junk science through so-called alternative medicine, thanks in part to Oprah giving people like Jenny McCarthy a platform to sprout her science. Enter Facebook. Social media is a platform that allows anti-vaccine messages to spread like wildfire, but it's only coming from a few sources. As this February 2019 article in The Atlantic shows, most of the information about vaccines comes from just 7 different sites. Most social media platforms have moved to block anti-vaccine content or to keep it from showing up in searches. After places like Pinterest and GoFundMe stopped allowing anti-vaccine content on their sites, Facebook followed suit, but has proved too little, too late. From this Wired article, the question is why the company waited until it became the subject of media reports and criticism from a lawmaker to finally act. In March of this year, 18-year-old Ethan Linderberger was vaccinated against his mom's wishes. When he appeared before the Senate to testify, he told them that his mother got her information about vaccines from Facebook. And this is the part that I wish got more airplay. Someone is feeding people bad information. It's not just a lot of moms using Google instead of their doctor's advice. So there are actual companies out there trying to feed people bad science. They're hiding behind nice sounding buzzwords like healthy, green, and natural. Heck, in a way, they're kind of part of a larger movement in the US to be more ecological and to buy local food. And in a move that surprises no one, they're hiding behind free speech to defend their dangerous ideas. There's a lot of dubious science out there, often tied with health. Vaccines affect public health, but things like organic food and GMOs don't, and there's plenty of misinformation about organic food and the benefits of it floating around out there. Again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with preferring unprocessed foods over spam or soup manicuring machines, but taking medical advice from attractive vegan bloggers over certified nutritionists or actual medical professionals is a bad idea. We all know that trusting memes or cute-sounding Facebook pages is a lousy way to stay informed. The problem is anti-vaxxers take a reasonable idea, like getting a second opinion about medical advice, and run with it to a dangerously irresponsible place. Remember Edmund Hammond Clarke, the guy who said that if women went to university, they'd go sterile? It'd be nice to say this line of thinking is outdated. But in 2005, Harvard University President Lawrence Summers said that men are better at women in sciences because of biological differences. While the systemic barriers keeping women out of science are gone, the old attitudes clearly remain. Phew, that was a lot of research. Now look at some memes. Point 5, Karen memes and blaming women. So last fall, I noticed a lot of memes cropping up using specific women's names. This was always a specific type of woman, older, unlikable, and, well, judgmental. Soon, one name was selected for this woman, Karen. On Reddit in particular, this name became synonymous with certain types of behaviors. Complaining to the manager when needs aren't met, expecting special treatment for having children, and in general, an overall sense of entitlement. Karen has now morphed into a distinct caricature, complaining, using essential oils and crystals, and strangely, sometimes anti-vax. Where are the anti-vax dads? Watching news stories featuring interviews with anti-vaxxers, we see it's almost always women being interviewed. Studies have shown that women are more active in the anti-vaxxer movement than men. However, is it true that more people in the anti-vax movement are women? While it's a perception that there are more women anti-vaxxers than men, this isn't necessarily true. A 2015 study by consumer group Civic Insight found that more men than women hold anti-vaccine beliefs. Studies by the Pew Research Foundation show that more men than women distrust vaccines, though by a much smaller percentage. 11% of men to 8% of women say that vaccines are not safe. Also, some prominent anti-vaccine websites have been started by men, such as Joe Lord. So I am not suggesting women should defer to their husbands or anything like that, but parenting is a team effort, or at least it should be. And I think it's telling and a little bit sad that we're willing to let women take the brunt of child rearing, even making all the medical decisions of their children's health, while letting dad just take a back seat. Heck, even die-hard Redditors have noticed the weirdness of using Karen as a catch-all term.
It's very refreshing to see an entitled dad and have the mom actually trying to defend the flight attendant, saying, "Honey, please calm down," when clearly the dad was not having it, and not in a good way. Had I ever really thought about a Karen being a dad? I don't think I have, mostly because of the gendered nature of the name, I guess, but hey, it makes sense. Anyone can be a Karen.
Which is why anti-vaxxers being framed as women making bad choices really rubs me the wrong way, especially given the historical biases women have faced in regards to medicine. As if men have always been rational and never relied on superstition for anything. Especially when anti-vaxxers are guilty of something most of us do, confirmation bias. In general, people read and watch stuff that's reinforced with their own opinions. So to wrap up, what can we do? First, remember that anti-vaxxers are parents. Misguided parents who believe in bad science. Listen without judging to people who are hesitating about vaccines. Telling people about the effectiveness of vaccines doesn't change their minds or make them want to vaccinate their children, as studies show. Instead, let them talk. This is not to validate their beliefs, but to let them talk to someone outside the anti-vaccine movement about their concerns. So part of the fear of vaccines stems from a fear of autism, which is awful and judgmental. Kids with autism are kids. There's something really terrible about preferring measles to autism. People with mental health issues, such as myself, or people with autism are still, first and foremost, people. 3, don't share insulting anti-vax memes. Yes, anti-vaxxers are wrong about the science, but remember, this hesitancy comes from an understandable place. They're not actively trying to kill or maim their children. And by sharing these memes, you're not going to win a most correct person on the internet award. 4, the most effective way to deal with this problem is by not debating it. Write to your state governor, your local congressperson, and tell them you want vaccines to be mandatory in public schools. 5, report, flag any anti-vaccine propaganda you see. Remember, the actual villains here are people who are profiting from spreading bad science. I mean, Facebook's reporting system is pretty terrible, but it's worth a shot. Remember how we got here. If there were as many female doctors as male ones, if doctors overall took women's health concerns as seriously as men's, and if women were better represented in clinical trials, this issue wouldn't be what it is. Sexism brought us here, and fighting sexism will get us out. Thanks so much for watching. For reference, the books I used were mainly Inferior by Angela Saini. For the history of midwives, I used this one, The Art of Midwifery, which talks about the history of midwifery in Europe. For the US, I used this one, Lying In. My script advisor was Brianna Stallings, and I've left some links to the research I did in the video description.